Welcome to another virtual training session. We are continuing a series of videos where we are trying our very best to make sure that all of our local chairmen, new ones especially, have the information that they need to be able to do their jobs effectively. Normally, we would be conducting these classes at the W3 Center, but we're unable to do that due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we are trying our very best to make sure that these are as practical as possible. I've got a lot of notes that we're going to go through today. I'll actually put a slide or a PowerPoint up on the screen and share that screen with you, and we'll walk through them together. One of the good things about having the video sessions is that if you hear something that piques your interest, you can stop it, take notes, you can go back and play it again. But one of the other things that would go hand in hand with that is I would just remind you that all of this material is available in Schoology. And so the resources that we use, the examples that we point to, you'll be able to find those in hard copy or in readily accessible formats through Schoology. So great resource there. When we look at today's topic is talking about proof and evidence that's needed in grievances, as well as scope and past practice claims. So we're going to talk about some things that you probably don't just sit around and talk about every day. These are kind of, there's a lot of different scenarios that we're going to talk through. But what we want to do is try to go through the most common grievances that you're going to get, the most common grievance. We use the term grievance and claim interchangeably. So if a member asks you, would you file a claim for me? What they're saying is the contract has been violated and I want you to grieve that or file a grievance for me. We're going to talk about what it's necessary, why we do that, and what is necessary to be able to be successful in doing that. So got a lot of material that we're going to cover, and I'm going to try to do it just as efficiently as possible. So I'm going to share the screen with you, and we'll walk through some of these notes together. Let's see if I could get cooperation from my computer. All right. So again, we're talking today about proof and evidence that we need in claims handling. One of the exercises that you'll spend some time doing, and we'll actually be doing some interactive work around this, is actually handling some different claims. Now, some of them will be claims that are live claims, for lack of a better term, that you're actually working on. Some of them are some sample claims that we use in classes in group settings. And so you're going to be you'll be paired with mentors. We'll be doing some different live sessions to try to make sure that you grasp the concepts that we're talking about. But before we actually get into the interactive part and before we actually do the assignments, we want to talk about kind of building that base terminology and understanding what it is that that you're expected to do as it relates to claims and grievances for the role of local chairperson. So let's talk for a moment about why it is that we file claims. And normally we would be having an interactive classroom setting, and so not having that, I could ask you that, but just think in your mind, what are some reasons that we would file claims? And ultimately, it boils down to the fact that we file claims because that's the way that we enforce our contract, or that's the way we enforce our collective bargaining agreement. Each one of our agreements have rules. They have rules about overtime. They have rules about meal periods. They have rules about rates of pay, and they have rules about rest days, and on it goes. Well, if we do not enforce those rules, then what happens is the contract can be violated, and the company can get away with it, and we're not allowing our members to be able to gain the full benefit of their agreement. And so we file claims to enforce the terms of our agreement. But remember, there really is not a trophy that we would give out for just filing a bunch of claims. Filing claims is necessary to enforce our agreement. But the real purpose in filing a claim is because we believe that we're right and we want to win the arguments that we're raising, or we want to be able to win the claim. We want it to be successful. So the foundation for any successful claim or appeal or any of that process is just like you see on the screen in front of you: proof and evidence. We have to be able to do that. So how do we do that? Well, let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, as you get started in preparing for your claim, it every local chairman has those claims that where the member calls them and explains to them, hey, this happened. And in the member's mind and in the local chairman's mind, it is a open and shut case, no problem at all. It should be very easy. I could talk to the manager and we're going to get it fixed, or I should file a claim and it's going to be paid, no problem. And truthfully, that should be our goal. But while we would have the goal to settle all the claims at the first level, the reality is that we have to get the proof and evidence together, just like it's going to go all the way to arbitration. Because there's a lot of times that we find ourselves in cases that we think are open and shut, but the company just pushes and pushes and pushes, taking chances, and we end up having to do appeals. We end up having a docket for arbitration, those kind of things. So the reality is that what we've seen is that most of our local managers no longer have any authority to resolve claims. That it's something that labor relations does, and labor relations generally is a group of attorneys that the company's hired to, at least we continue to see that now, that they continue to hire to challenge every process and every part of the process. So yes, when it seems open and shut, that does not remove the need, or that doesn't make that burden any less important. So you are going to have to prepare for the worst, getting all that information together. So from the very beginning, as soon as you get the phone call, you start building your case. What happened, who, what, when, where, why, how, all of those things, you start getting that, building that case at the very beginning. When we mentioned that we would take the steps to prepare as if every case is going to arbitration, well, let's talk about that term. You've probably heard your assistant national representative or your national representative share that term with you in conversations, or maybe you've heard that term at a local lodge meeting, that somebody's case, especially in discipline, somebody's case was going to arbitration. Well, arbitration in the railroad is different from what you may have heard about or read about in other industries. We aren't actually going and given the opportunity to provide persuasive testimony in front of an arbitrator. The arbitrator reads the written record. So they start with the claim that you file. They look at the evidence. They look at the reason the company denied the claim. They look at the appeal that's done by either you or your assistant national representative or your national representative. They look at all of the writing that's gone back and forth on that claim, and they make a determination based on the record that was confirmed on the property. So I don't know how else to say it other than it's extremely important that what is submitted to the company, the information that you're given to your national representative to handle your appeals, that information is that you can get, that you arm them with everything you have to be able to make a successful claim. Arbitrators, well, let me back up. When you see what's underlined on the slide there, record introduced on the property. What that means is that you have a responsibility as early as possible, ideally when you file the original claim, to give all the information that you can. Now you can submit some things to your NR or national representative on appeal that they could add to that, but we can't wait until arbitration and say, oh yeah, we found this piece of evidence, and so we want to. It doesn't work that way. We have to be able to get this information on the claim before it's docketed to go to arbitration. So it's important that you start getting this information together very quickly. So what does a claim look like? You're going to be doing some exercises. If you haven't already done some claims, your NRs may have worked with you already. But so you're going to be doing some exercises that kind of breaks down the facts of a claim, or the parts of a claim. And a claim always has a statement of claim, and that's saying basically two parts. what the violation was and what the remedy is. And very simply, you'll have a header that says statement of claim. And you'll have part one. And part one will say the carrier violated rule one of the, of this agreement. And on the date, January 1st, 2020, when it did not call claimant so-and-so for the holiday work, you're going to have a statement of claim. Part two would be the remedy. As a result of this violation of the agreement, the company shall now pay the claimant 8 hours pay, overtime rate, in addition to their holiday. So you got a statement of claim that lays out what happened and what we're expecting is the remedy as a result of that. And then the summary of the facts or statement of facts, that's kind of putting together that chronological order of what happened, and so we'll give you some examples of that. But it's really important that you understand that facts are facts. So we don't put our arguments and our thoughts and our opinions about what could have happened in the facts. The facts are, January 1st, 2020 was a holiday in accordance with the agreement. Claimant was signed up to protect work on the holiday board. Claimant was not called and a junior employee worked. Those are kind of facts. Now, the arguments about carrier violated the agreement or arguments, we'll use sometimes the term argument / position of employees. And so that's where we lay out kind of that concept of why this is a violation of the agreement, why the agreement or how the agreement was violated, and what support we have in support of our position. But really, the bulk of this segment is to talk about what's in red: evidence. Getting evidence as soon as possible and attaching it as exhibits to the claim. So we're going to try our very best to help you. The next slide is going to have a lot of examples of what evidence could be. But before we turn to that slide, be thinking in your mind about what evidence you might think. The example that I gave was a holiday claim, or I'm sorry, a holiday runaround. So there's a number of examples: train masters hauling crews, managers ordering parts. I mean, there's all kinds of things. And so be thinking about different things that we could use as exhibits. And we're going to look at a list of, this is certainly not an exhaustive list, but it's really a helpful one to kind of get your mind thinking that way. So probably is no better evidence that we could ever have than language of our agreement that supports what we're saying. For example, rule number 5 says that the holidays includes New Year's Day. There's agreement language that addresses a lot of scenarios. And generally speaking, if you have a claim, you're going to be able to, you should be able to speak first to, well, no, that violated our agreement. Because if it doesn't violate the agreement, then chances are it's not a grievance. So there should always be an agreement language that we are relying on to support our claim. Bulletins that advertise what job descriptions are, who's responsible for what duties. Bulletins are helpful. Rest days, hours, those kind of things. Statements from employees, just getting your coworkers or your peers to be able to write down a statement about what they saw and what happened and provide that for you. That's helpful. Call records. Everybody's got cell phones now, and so there's all kinds of records that are available. But inevitably, when it comes to calling of overtime and things, most every office has some type of way that they record that information. That information could be used. Email correspondence, manager ordering parts. A lot of times there's, it may happen when it's an urgent need, and so they send an email, and you or your member is copied on that email, or they find out about it after the fact, and one of the ways they find out is they saw an email about what happened. Pay stubs, invoices, public records. When we look at newspaper, media articles, there's a lot of times that business deals, as people, as things are happening when it comes to, contractors and what's going to be going on, you can find things there and use to kind of support your position. That's not the most common for sure, but it is one. Pictures, got to be careful. We'll talk about some of these things. Reports that you get, safety meeting reports, different things. anything that tells the story or confirms the story and the fact pattern that we're telling. Arbitration awards are evidence that, hey, this is something this is the way it's supposed to be applied. There is a lot of evidence that's possible. But you know what? It's important to, just as important as it is for us to talk about what is evidence, it's really important for us to understand what's not evidence. And here's what is not evidence. This is the most common that you're going to get as a local chairman, that people think just because they said it, hearsay. The member saw, the member heard, the member said. That's not evidence, unfortunately. Doesn't mean we don't believe them. We absolutely believe them, but it doesn't meet the burden of proof. It's not evidence. And so a member says that they saw a trainmaster haul a crew. A member heard a manager talking about a part that he ordered. That is not evidence. So they can point you in the right direction, but you're going to have the responsibility of being able to prove that. So all those things are, and there's other possibilities. Remember, that's not a list of that's comprehensive. It's just or exhaustive. That's just a lot of different options. So what evidence is needed? Let's talk for just a moment. Let's imagine for a second, for just a kind of a hypothetical. You've got you've got the example that we're using on this slide, that the company or the carrier failed to pay a member overtime when he or she worked more than 8 hours in a day. So think for just a moment. Normally this would be a part of an interactive session, but just think in your mind, what evidence would you need to be able to support that claim? Well, here's the way these claims normally start. Your phone rings or you get an email and it's from a member, and that member isn't happy. And the reason that member is not happy is because they just got their pay stub, and their pay stub shows that they were paid straight time for the 9th and 10th hour that they were held to work. Now, what evidence would you need? Well, you're going to need the pay stub. You're going to need that record that shows that. And then you're going to need not just the record that shows for that day, but you're going to need the agreement support. You're going to need rule whatever of your agreement that says any hours beyond those scheduled or any hours more than 8 in a day are be paid at the time and a half rate. You're going to need maybe a job bulletin that says this person's job is assigned from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And so evidence one would be this person's job was assigned 7 to 3. Evidence B, the second piece of evidence would be a pay sheet or a pay slip where the person worked from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., but we're all paid at straight time. And then the agreement support that says any hours outside of their regular assigned hours or any hours over 8 is for time and a half. So again, knowing your agreement and understanding those rules, getting the information that you need to be able to support that claim. So, and then the other thing that is most obvious that you could use is a statement from the employee saying, absolutely, I was here from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Trainmaster so-and-so required me to stay to assist a crew until their job was complete. So there's a lot of different pieces, something so simple that should just be absolutely open and shut, but still going through, checking all those boxes, getting all the evidence that's needed. That's what makes successful claims. So back to the point that I made just a little bit ago about what's not evidence. We can't just say because we said so. We can't really just say because that's the way it's supposed to be. There is no ought to be rule in any of our agreements. There are clear written rules that we have to enforce. So we have to prove that we're right. Unfortunately, that sometimes can rub people the wrong way, because it's almost like when you ask them to prove that they're right, they take that as you're doubting them. And that's not the case at all. We're not doubting. We don't believe that a member would just come to us and make something up just to make something up. We believe what they say. Unfortunately, us believing it and them saying it, that's not enough. We have to prove what we're saying. Whoever is in using arbitration terms, it's the petitioner who has the burden of proof. And so, because we're filing a claim, we're the ones that are saying that the grievance or that the agreement has been violated. We have the burden of proof, where it's exactly the opposite in discipline cases where the company is saying somebody else violated a rule, a working rule or an operating rule or whatever. And so they're getting disciplined. The company has the burden of proof there. We don't have to prove that the person's innocent. The company would have to prove that they were guilty. In this case, where grievances or claims are being filed, we have to prove that the company violated the rule, and we do that with proof and evidence. So the next thought is getting evidence as soon as possible, making sure that we start that out. You know, there are a number of examples that I could give you of where local chairperson, good local chairmen, experienced local chairpersons have uh, sent claims to the company thinking that it was an open and shut case, only to get that claim sent back, denied. And then it gets to my office as the national representative or the national vice president, and you review it and you say, well, I absolutely believe that this local chairman has written a good claim. And I believe that the member told the truth, but we still didn't prove it. And man, that's a tough decision for a national rep to have to tell a local chairman that's worked real hard and to tell a member who got their agreement, who got shortchanged. It's really tough to have to tell them, sorry, we can't do anything with it at this point. And the reason is a lot of times that is because the evidence wasn't submitted when it was available. So working on that, building that case just as soon as you learn of a violation, that's going to help you in the long run. So when you think about that, the local chairman has to get the facts. You got to know what happened, and then start gathering that evidence at the beginning of the process. The you know, I think sometimes local chairmen they really feel the weight of the responsibility of the job, and it is a very um, it's a big responsibility, and we understand that, and so you've got our commitment that as mentors, as national representatives, as assistant national representatives, as the staff at the Grand Lodge, we all are committed to doing everything we can to helping you. But the local chairman has the biggest responsibility in getting evidence. And the reason we say that is because you're an accredited representative of the organization. That means your members have elected you. And there is a certain authority that comes with that to be able to demand information of the railroad. And I don't use the word demand as in you go in and you slam your hand on tables and scream and shout. I use that as a fact-based term to say, no, I'm asking you, manager, when I send you an email asking you for this or what happened, when I approach you in a conversation, I'm doing so as a accredited representative of the organization. And there's a certain responsibility and authority that comes with that. And so as that representative, you are the one that's empowered and equipped to be able to get that information. So as you get started getting information, you're going to inevitably turn to and try to develop for each case. How much evidence do I need? Do I have to, do I have to give, you know, um, the entire agreement? Do I have to give every bulletin from the last 6 months? How much do I need? Well, the answer to that is, as much as possible. Now, again, we want the evidence that supports this claim, right? We don't need the evidence that's supporting every claim. So just adding a bunch of papers and, for instance, saying, hey, look, I've got 100 pages of evidence. Well, okay, but does that support the claim? What we need is, technical term here, preponderance of evidence. And we'll talk about what does that mean. Really, what preponderance of evidence means, this isn't a court of law. We're not asking you to be an attorney. We're not asking you to, go and testify in court. A preponderance of the evidence means it's more likely than not. It's more likely than not that the agreement was violated. So It's not a court of law where it's beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a preponderance of the evidence. So, in every case, every claim, every time, we have to prove two things: that there was a rule that was violated, and that what we said happened really happened. If we can't prove those two things, then we're the claim is going to be lacking. Now, more times than not, we could prove the second part there. Again, back to the point that our members don't just call us and make up stories. They're not lying just to create work for us. That's not it at all. What they said happened. The train master hauled the crew, or the train master or the manager ordered the part, or the crew caller failed to call the crew or the clerk. There are all kinds of things that happen, and yes, it really happened. The event happened, but we have to be able to point it back and tie that to a rule of why that's a violation of the agreement. Can't be a violation of the agreement because this person didn't like it. It's not a violation of the agreement because it's not quote unquote fair. It's not a violation of the agreement because um, it upset people. Those aren't violations. It's a violation of the agreement because we have a rule that says you're supposed to do things this way, and the way it was done was a contradiction of the way the rules are written. So we have to be able to tie those things to the rules. So sometimes, as you probably know, the actual meaning or interpretation of a rule could be in dispute. Here's what I would suggest to you. You're going to file the claim because you're representing your members, but I would strongly suggest when that happens, get with your A&R, get with your NR, work with them to be able to try to understand a little bit of the history of how that's worked and see if there's certain things that they want you to add in your claim. So get with them, especially on that. Now, again, they'll be involved heavily. They should be involved heavily in dealing in assisting you with that. So if you have those things that come up in the near future, absolutely get those guys in touch with or get in touch with your NR or A&R. So start with asking some easy questions. What rule or rules were violated? What am I going to need to do to prove this claim? Building a case, again, asking yourself, having that honest dialogue, and again, it's the evidence that you need. That doesn't mean that you're going to single-handedly get it. You're best equipped to do that, but you're going to be able to identify. Well, here's what I need from you. Remember, Johnny calls you and says they didn't call me for overtime on Saturday. Okay, Johnny, can you, when you go back to work, and you don't work in that same terminal, you work across town. Hey, Johnny, I tell you what, I hear you. So when you go back to work on Monday, can you get me the call records? If you want to take if you want to run a copy of that, you're going to have to gauge the flexibility that your local managers have with that. If there's, if managers are really strict on getting those things, well, then you'll have to work with how to get that. If managers are really strict, you could send an email requesting those records, but you're going to have to decide what you need and then how you're going to get it. And it may be just asking the member to send you something from their pay. It may be contacting another member and saying, hey, did you work first shift Saturday? Did you work? Would you mind sending me an email that just confirmed that you were? You don't have to tell them necessarily what you're doing, but you shouldn't try to hide it necessarily. But simple questions, simple answers, simple statements. The point of that is you have to decide what is necessary, what you're going to need, and then you're going to have to decide what are you going to be able to do to get or to secure that information. So who was involved? Seniority dates. A lot of times the example that I just used where Johnny didn't get called on Saturday morning for overtime, but Johnny didn't get called, but whatever other employee did, you would want to prove or show that Johnny is more senior on the roster than the employee that got called. Johnny was available. You want to show that Johnny was available. You can do that by his bulletin. His bulletin shows that he's assigned Monday through Friday. So he's off on Saturday. Dates and times, locations, what happened. If there's other things that you think of, statements, if there's again, payroll records, sign-in sheets, if there's things that you could get, make a note that that's what you need, and then go after getting it. If that means you have to ask a member to help you, now we're going to be careful about that. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. We're not going to set members up to get in trouble, so have to be careful with that. But think about what you need, and then begin to gather that evidence, because you're going to need it to prove the claim. Statements are very, very good. You could get Johnny to write you a statement that says he wasn't called for over. Let's say, for instance, the example, Johnny wasn't called on Saturday for overtime. Well, you could get a statement from Johnny. Let's imagine that you sent the manager an email and asked for the records, and the manager doesn't respond to you. Let's just say the manager just blows you off, doesn't respond to you. Oh, you're not dead in the water. You can ask Johnny, write you a statement. I was available between call time is at 5 o'clock. I was available. There were no missed calls. The company failed to call me, and I did not work on Saturday. Statements don't have to be professional as far as there's no formal requirements. Write it out, sign it, put a date on it. I've seen some very interesting statements over the years where people write things. Sometimes they write way too much. Sometimes they don't write enough. But that's where you, as the local chairman, you know what you need. You know you've identified the evidence that you need. That's the reason you're going to the member and asking for a statement. So give them the information you need and ask them to put that in a statement, send it to you. Documents, you should have an understanding and permission to be able to get documents. If you don't have that and you're not given permission, don't take them. It's not worth you getting in trouble for stealing documents or things. So, but always ask for them. If there's documents that are helpful, ask. Do it in writing. Send an email, a text message that you could print out. Ask in writing, because if the carrier fails to respond or they refuse it, you'll be able to say, as a part of the record, you could put that in as evidence. We've requested the information that would prove our claim, and the carrier has denied our request. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that it's a slam dunk case, but man, it sure does look suspicious when an arbitrator says, well, wait a minute, the union asked for evidence. The company has the evidence, but they refuse to give it. There's really only one good reason why the company would refuse that evidence, and it's usually because it would support our claim. So we'll talk about that. We would normally, we would, in the instance where you request information and the information is, or the request is ignored or refused, we would make that a part of the record. And then if it came up that the company says, well, look, you didn't meet your burden of proof, we would argue an adverse inference, meaning that the company blocked us from getting the evidence that we need. The company doesn't have the responsibility to prove our claim for us. We have that responsibility. So if in doing that, we request information, it's refused, ignored, rejected, that is something that we would make a part of the record, and it would then help us, especially as those cases move forward. We would be able to point that out in a number of areas. I guess before we go to past practice, let me also say this. Back to the point that I raised earlier, you are the accredited representative as the local chairman. That means that you have a responsibility to get information, but you also have certain protections that come with you. Now, again, you can't lie, you can't cheat, you can't steal, but you have the right to ask for that information and to be provided it. So when it comes to, you really should never I can't think of a scenario where you would want to put your member in the position of asking for evidence. That's probably going to send some alarm bells off, and that's probably not going to be received well from the company, because the members, the employee, they don't have the same responsibility. They're not the same accredited representative. They don't have the same protection that you do. So be careful with that. But here I would also just say if you have issues getting evidence and how to facilitate those requests, or how do you word that, get with your A&R, get with your NR. They can help you work through those things. But that's something that you should be doing as the local chairman. Be careful not to put your members in that predicament. Okay. All right. So another claim, we got claims in general. That's what we've talked about to this point. Claims in general, overtime claims. I didn't get called for a holiday, a manager's ordering parts. General claims that occur, kind of the run-of-the-mill stuff. Now let's talk about two other kinds of claims. The second one we're going to talk about is past practice, and then we're going to talk about scope claims. So in past practice, a past practice, for a definition, is a long-standing, frequent, clear, and consistent practice that is accepted and known by the union and the carrier. Here's what this means. Just because it's been happening occasionally and no one ever got caught, that doesn't make a past practice. That makes somebody was lucky for a while. Past practice is something that has to have been going on for a while. It has to have been handled consistently, not just one employee getting away with something, but clear and consistent, and that it's known by both parties. So if it's if it's something that's just every once in a while and it goes under the radar, that's not establishing a past practice. A past practice that meets this standard is considered a part of the contract and can be grieved if violated or changed without the agreement. Now, again, I would say if you are dealing with past practice issues, you're going to want to involve your A&R or your NR very, very early in this process, because they're going to know a little bit more of the history probably of. Now, you may have worked in this location and can give them all of the history for how it's been applied there, but they're going to be able to help you word how you need sorry about that. They're going to be able to help you word help you word the claim in a way that's going to be successful. So past practice, things have been going a certain way for a long time. I give you an example. We've had examples where employees reporting to work, if they are reporting to work and this road crossing is blocked, it's been a acceptable practice that as long as you let the manager know that you were blocked by the train, then it's okay. When you clock in, your pay is not docked. All of a sudden, we get a new manager that comes into play, and he decides that no, that's not going to happen at all. You should have beat the train, and you should have known by some stretch that crossing was going to be blocked, and so you should be at work. And so the employee gets blocked by a train, and then he clocks in, and the manager docks his pay. Well, we don't have an agreement rule that says employees who are blocked by trains getting to work are still paid 8 hours. Again, the agreement kind of gives us that guide map. It doesn't identify every imaginable scenario, but it does say that we should be paid 8 hours for a day's work. And we do have a long-standing, very frequent, clear and consistent practice that the employees know about and have known about for years, and every manager prior to this new guy has known about, that says that if you're blocked by the crossing, you're still going to be paid the 8 hours. Now, that's a past practice claim. We would absolutely challenge that, and we would get statements from employees. We would get all kinds of evidence. So again, everything just because there's a change to something doesn't mean that it's automatically a violation of a past practice, right? But there are examples of where, even though our agreement doesn't say this in black and white, the practice of how it's been applied on the property supports what we're doing. So past practice, the reality is it's hard to prove past practice grievances. Again, because it requires, I think what happens is you'll probably hear from your members, well, the way they used to do it was, and they're going to point out whatever practice happened at whatever time in the past that was a more favorable solution or situation. The railroad is not precluded or stopped from changing their practices. They can change things. They just can't change things and violate our agreement. And if we have, by virtue of practice, we have the way the application of this rule or that rule has been applied is clear and consistent, known by both sides, we can challenge that. But I have to be upfront with you. Every example that there's a lot of examples that I could point to on past practice that aren't as clear and concise as the one that I gave you just a minute ago. Just because they did it that way for a while doesn't mean that they have to continue doing it that way. One of the examples that we would normally use in our class is, let's say for the last 25 years, every employee throughout the whole company received a turkey from the company for Thanksgiving. And you got new management that comes in and says, nope, we're not going to do that. I'm saving that money in the budget. Could we file that? Because our agreement does not say we have a turkey provision. So could we file that as a past practice? Well, the answer is yes, because it's something that was applied consistently. Obviously, both sides knew about it, and it was something that has been done for 25 years. So, would we argue that that was something that we could that was supported by past practice? Yes. Just because we file the claim, does that guarantee you that an arbitrator is going to make the company continue to provide a turkey for all of our members or bargain with us for something of equal value? Well, it doesn't guarantee it, but it certainly, we would be able to identify longevity, long-standing, consistently applied, frequent. It happened every year without fail, and it was known by both sides. So that's one that we could challenge that. We would see where it goes. I know of some that we've had recently with different freight railroads as it relates to precision scheduled railroading, where they've changed certain practices around providing PPE. There's arbitrators that have ruled kind of both sides of that, as far as, if it's not specifically spelled out in the agreement, then it's not required. But there are instances where we are able to prove past practice. The turkey one, I understand, it's kind of a stretch for the example, but it's a good one in that it shows just because a new manager comes in and decides that they want to change something willy-nilly, that doesn't mean, and it's not addressed in the agreement, they don't have a free-for-all. There are provisions where we can kind of challenge that and keep those things in check. So they are hard to win, but your national rep, your assistant national rep, they'll work with you on that. Also, worth reminding you, most of your claims, most of them are not going to be past practice related. That's an example, but it's one that we have to deal with. But that's not where most of your claim work is going to come from. Most of them are going to be kind of that general area that we talked about first, or this next group that we're going to talk about next. And I told you that was scope claims. So let's talk about those for just a moment. So when we think about scope claims, what is it that comes to mind? What is the scope of your agreement? And I'm sure most of you probably know, if you've looked at your agreement, which you should have as a local chairman, it's your responsibility to enforce it. Right towards the front of your agreement is going to be a rule, a scope rule. And that scope rule is going to define what your work is, what your either what your work is, or who the agreement applies to, and what does the agreement cover, the area or the scope of work. We talk about investigations, the scope of the investigation, how broad something is, what it covers is really by definition what we're talking about. So when we talk about scope claims, what we say is that we're looking at what's covered or what's addressed by the agreement. There are scope rules, and most everyone that's watching this video is going to have language that's very similar to one of these two paragraphs: positions and work scope rule. And it's going to say something just like what's in italics there, except as otherwise provided in this agreement, and you can read the rest. That talks about the work that's being covered cannot be removed without a specific agreement between the company's officer, and the general chairman or the union, company and the union. And you, as the local chairman, would not be authorized to negotiate those agreements to remove work. You certainly could work with your general chairman or the national representative, but the agreement is written so that there aren't, it tries to shield against a bunch of local agreements and local understandings and things. And so it really is designed to provide uniformity. And that's the reason the general chairman, the company's highest designated officer, in our world, it's national representative now. Or there's a much smaller paragraph below that, and that one's a little bit trickier when we think about that. These rules shall govern the hours of service and working conditions of the following employees. And then it'll have a list of positions and job categories and position titles. So when we think about positions or scope claims, what's the importance of scope claims, and why would we take time to cover that? Well, here's why. Because if we don't enforce the scope rules of our agreement, in other words, we're not protecting our work, over time, the company chips away at that by allowing another craft to do it, or another manager to do it, or another employee to do it. And before long, it becomes shared, and there really is no exclusivity to it. There's nothing that continues to identify that as our work. Well, if we don't have something to identify as our work, man, we're really going to have a hard time justifying that. No, there needs to be our positions. There needs to be our job assignments. We need to have jobs to be able to do this work. So this is, for lack of a better term, this is the lifeblood of your agreement, protecting the scope of your work. And that means involving your ANRs and your NRs and keeping them up to date, asking a lot of questions, filing grievances when necessary. We're talking about the absolute most important thing we do as representatives of members, especially on the property, is enforcing the scope rule of our agreement. Because as it gets eroded and as it becomes compromised, it's less easy, or it's more difficult for us to be able to distinguish that, no, that's our work, our people should be doing it, no one else should be doing it. So this is very, very important. I would go ahead and say to you that in the Schoology local chairman resources guide, there is a whole guide that is dedicated just to scope. If I imagine that it's probably already been required reading by the time you watch this video, but if for some reason you haven't watched that, you haven't looked at that, I would absolutely encourage you to do that just as quickly as possible. We've had some locals that have put in some good feedback and made some good contributions toward that. Really and truly, it just emphasizes how important it is that we do it. And again, just like we have to have evidence, proof and evidence for the general claim about overtime, about a manager ordering a part. When we begin to talk about scope rules and the company being able to use a contractor, or the company being able to use a train master, or the company being able to use and share our work with other employees, they will fight us tooth and nail, because they do not enjoy exclusive privileges or exclusive designation or assignments of work. So they will fight tooth and nail, and they will throw everything they have at that. So gathering that evidence is going to be very, very critical. I would encourage you to, as you're at lodge meetings, as you're on the property, as you visit other properties where you have members at, talk to your members. Tell them to be on the lookout for contractors, for managers, for other employees doing their, and report that to you. Report it immediately, so that you can track that and you can begin to gather the evidence that you're going to need to be able to support that claim. The types of work rules, positions, and work, that's the stronger of the two. The general one gives to us a little bit more flexibility, much more difficult to prove that the work is exclusively ours. So positions and work scope rule, as I said, it's a little bit stronger. It gives us that, the work belongs to us. The work can't be performed unless we negotiate an agreement that identifies those terms. That's happened. You might say, well, why in the world would you ever negotiate an agreement that does that? Well, as technology comes in, and you might be better suited to negotiate an attrition model versus just a clean cut and eliminating an entire department. There's a number of things that your NRs and ANRs factor in when they're having those those discussions. So under positions and work, we don't have to prove that we own the work exclusively, but in other words, we don't have to prove that we do the work at every single location across the entire system. But we would still have to prove that the work is being done at this location, that it's that customary practice, and that the violation occurred. So in other words, we would still have to prove that the specifics about, for instance, a manager ordering parts. Well, under a positions and work scope rule, the ordering of inventory belongs to the clerks, and ordering of inventory belongs to us. So we would argue that the company violated the scope when the manager ordered the parts. And so what we'd have to then show is what part the manager ordered, what manager ordered it, who was the senior available employee that should have been called, what was the remedy, could the person that was on duty have done it, and or would it required overtime. There's a lot of factors that go in there, but we would still have to prove that the violation occurred. I mentioned the general rules, or general scope rule. I guess for lack of a better term, it's just a little bit more general. It's not as specific. And it doesn't say that the work belongs exclusively or solely to our craft, or that it has to have an agreement to take it away. And so that makes the threshold or the burden of proof just a little bit tougher. Winning a claim under a general scope rule, we would have to prove that a violation occurred, but we would have to show that our employees perform that work exclusively throughout the system, not just at your location or the specific location. So again, these are things that as the local chairman, we want you to know what you're looking for. We're certainly not going to throw you to the wolves. You have ANRs, NRs, we've got industry relations. We will do everything we can to help develop that, because we're not going to take poorly written or poorly documented scope cases to arbitration. The reason for that is we would not want to risk getting a bad award that an arbitrator says, no, absolutely, the union failed to meet their burden of proof, so the company can share in the work. So we're going to be very careful and meticulous in reviewing scope cases, especially before they're progressed to arbitration. So want you to remember that. But just know that I know we're using a lot of big words. I'm talking pretty fast. We are not going to just say, hey, look, here's the world, go conquer it. We are trying to give you tools so that you know what you're looking at. We know what you need to, or that you know what you need to be looking for. But then you take that information, you put it together on paper, and for any of the gaps that need to be filled in, you know that you come in straight to your ANR or your NR, and they are going to help you kind of perfect those things as much as possible. So don't want you to feel overwhelmed with that. So when we talk about scope claims, just like the general claims that we talked about, not being paid overtime, those things, when we talk about past practice claims, we're still going to need evidence. Evidence is a common theme in this industry. And just because you said it happened, or your member said it happened, or just because you saw it happen, that's not enough to prove. We're going to have to be able to show that the company took our work and gave it or assigned it to another craft or another contractor or a manager, etc. We're going to have to prove that happened. So there are things that you could do to be able to show that. You can take a statement or affidavit. That term is used kind of interchangeably there. Getting a statement that shows, hey, members that have longevity with the company, those are great statements to get. How long that person's worked there, how long they've been been in this position, how long they've been doing that work, what those duties were before the company gave that work to or started letting a manager do it or a train master do it or a contractor do it. How did the employee know that that happened? Did the company give a notice? If so, let's include the notice. Was it in a job briefing? Well, who else was in the job briefing? Let's get their statements. So did the company put out, did they change a bulletin that said this? Did they say that they entered into a contract with another vendor, and so they're gonna take over something? There's all kinds of potential, but the only way that you get to the bottom of what evidence is available is if you start looking at what do I need? What claims, what information do I need? Statements are a great place to start. Ask the member to give to you, when did this happen? What was the starting date? How often is it happening? Um, what part of the day is this taking up? This was something that the member was doing, the first thing every day. It consumed the first 2 hours of their day or the first half of their day every day. And now it's not. We're going to have to be able to get as much detail as possible, getting all the specifics. And so you can see that there's things there. If you've got a job bulletin that shows the duties and lists them there, that's great. If you've got emails that shows, or if you've got postings on a bulletin board that says, hey, look, every day make sure that that this is done, or once a week make sure that this is done. Copies of those things, that's helpful. Again, following the same rules of evidence gathering. Don't put your member in a position where they're going to compromise their job. You're the accredited representative. You're the one that has the responsibility, and you're the one that has the protection to get that evidence. So if your member says, well, look, it's not listed in my job, this particular duty is not listed in my job description, but there is there's a sign that's posted on the bulletin board that says, for help ordering this material, for help getting this part, please see the chief clerk or the general clerk or whatever. You should ask the manager to send you a picture, for permission to take a picture of that bulletin board, or to say that my understanding is that there is a notice that's posted. Could you please send me a copy of that? Doing that in writing is the absolute only way to ensure that now we have that at least introduced into the record, because the manager could ignore your email. He may delete your email. He may respond and say, no, thanks, I'm not interested. Well, now you have a record that we tried to prove what we are saying, and the company has blocked us from that. So, but you can see a number of things that are listed there. The main thing is get as broad as you can, but make sure that you help that member kind of guide them to telling you the information that is needed there. So the employee would have to sign and date the statement. If there's job descriptions that could be, or job bulletins that have descriptions that list those positions, by all means, attach those. I would also, let's see, I made a couple of notes for myself here. So really important, if it's possible, get more than one statement. If it's something that's affecting a department, get a good sampling of employees. Okay, if you can get senior people, you can get some that don't have quite as much seniority, but you want those statements to kind of tell the same story, different perspective, but telling the same story. Certainly you can make a kind of a cookie cutter statement. You can make one and ask them to sign it. And if you need to do that, okay. But it's better sometimes to have it put in the employee's own words. But if their own words, if they're too wordy or it's too lengthy, and you need to really narrow that down, you can do that. That's not a problem. But again, with scope things, I would imagine, especially for new local chairmen starting out, before you hit send on these, I would encourage you to talk with your A&R, talk with your NR, let them review it first. They're going to be able to help you identify what needs to be done. So kind of, I guess, a summary here. We have to have evidence to win claims. We can't just say it happened and our members are going to, again, the temptation is when we say that's not enough evidence. The temptation for the member is to say, well, you don't believe me. And that's not the case at all. We just have to remind them, we believe you, but we have to be able to prove you right. We have to be able to prove that what we said happened, and we also have to be able to prove that that's a violation of the agreement. Making evidence a part of the record on the property, so getting it on the record at the very beginning, if it's at all possible. Now, certainly, there are times when an A&R or an NR may call you as the local chairman and say, hey, I'm looking at this claim that you filed and I'm getting ready to appeal it, or I'm going to conference it with labor relations. Do you have a copy of X? Or do you have or know where we could get Y? Or do you know if there is something that's posted? Well, absolutely. Get them the information that they can. They're going to add it, make it a part of the appeal. But you want to get all the evidence that you can to support that claim, and you want to attach it as early as possible. You have the don't forget, you have the responsibility as the duly accredited representative. Your members elected you to enforce their agreement. People, local chairpersons, they rise to that position from a number of different circumstances. But the bottom line is your members elected you to enforce their agreement. You have that responsibility, and you also have the protection to be able to get that information, not stealing, not taking it deceitfully, not lying. You get it, or you make the request and ask for it. And if that request is denied, then you would put it, have it in writing and make that a part of the record. Hey, we tried to get the call records. We tried to get this notice. We requested it. We were denied. And those are things that are very helpful. So the next thing is, let's talk through some examples. Now, in fairness, my assignment to this point has been primarily dealing with CSX and with Norfolk Southern. So most of and I was a local chairman of primarily CSX employees. So most of my examples are things that I've been involved with very recently, or my office has been involved with. So I know that there are a number of examples from every carrier. These are just ones that I could get pretty quickly and be able to put together. So I'm going to need to stop this and go through some screens. We're going to look at the payroll claim. We're going to look at computer input. We're going to look at, believe it or not, grass cutting. That's a claim that we were successful in. Ordering taxis for crews. That's a different kind of example that I want to give you. And then an intermodal claim for a manager doing some of our work. So let me stop this and let's see if I can bring those up. All right. So let's look at this is the payroll claim. So this happened in Richmond, Virginia. One of our local chairmen, a good local chairman, been around a while, and he filed a claim for managers inputting payroll. We've had clerks that worked in the in the department there, mainly doing payroll for the maintenance away crews, the mechanical forces at Bryant Park there in Virginia. And so the company said, hey, we are implementing this new system that time tracks, and it's going to automate the payroll. And we are going to we're going to train you guys, but we're going to train we're going to train the managers, we're going to train the foreman, and we're going to train the other employees. Clerks, you already know how to do payroll. You're not going to have to go to this. And so time tracks was implemented. And what happened was it really didn't get automated. What happened was these managers, these foremen, and the maintenance away employees were essentially doing their own pay. They were going in and adjusting it. They were showing themselves used on other positions. So it never really was automated. The local chairman he wrote this statement and got the members to sign it. So he took the facts that he got from the members, and he wrote up a statement. He got the members to sign it, and he attached this as a part of his claim. So what you notice, well, here's the exhibits. He lists them here. This is what he used as evidence. the training schedule that the managers and the foremen attended to train to do this work, the payroll timesheet that shows the job briefing and what was going to be covered, a new one and what it covers now, the timesheet from and the company's timesheet and time tracks checkout policies, an email from the manager talking about when this is going to start, an email from a manager requesting verification of a vacation, statement from another local chairman from the IAM, a statement from a mechanic that worked in the shop there, another email from the manager, then the order of events for how things happen. So what they did was they said, look, this is our work. This is our work. It's not being automated. There is no agreement to remove this work from us. This is our work. And they made this claim and they filed claims for a continuous claim for every day. And now I want you to know the jobs weren't cut. The people continued to work, but this was a large part of their work. And these claims were handled through our office. They were company denied them, says it wasn't our work. It was truly automated. There was they didn't own it. They weren't editing. They were only approving their own payroll. They came up with every excuse in the world. But and again, this will be in Schoology, so you can look at it. I'm not going to bore you by reading it off the screen, but I wanted you to see this information got input at the time of the claim, the time the claim was filed. The local chairman did a great job putting all of this together, getting statements from these people, getting all this information, and in doing so, these three people, they split a settlement of about $72,000 was the monetary, and this work was returned to us. And the company continues to try to find ways to automate it, but they haven't yet. And so these claims that the local chairman filed, again, resulted in almost $25,000 each going in his members' pockets as a result of just good detective work, getting the evidence that was needed, and submitting it. So the next one is, this is an actual sample of a claim that was put in by one of our local chairmen in Jacksonville. And this is really dealing with computer functions where it's a certain screen that CSX uses to essentially waybill cars or reset waybills on cars. And computer functions have a long history. I don't want to bore you with that, but computer functions have a long history of dispute on CSX. Now, these particular claims, this local chairman had an automated system where they could put information into a spreadsheet and it would automatically generate it into the claim form here. And the reason they have that system is because they file a lot of claims. So this particular subject, you can see what's statement of claim, statement of fact, and then the position of the employees. And so some of your exercises will go through that. But what they're saying is up here that the company violated our agreement, Rule 1, which is the scope rule of this agreement. Rule 18 is the rule that talks about how to call to fill extra work. When on July 2nd, it allowed this manager to reset the waybill of a car. And so what they're claiming is 8 hours of overtime for the day just for that one push of a button. We don't get 8 hours for the push of a button, but it serves the purpose. That's what we're requesting anyway. Well, then they go on and they talk about the facts and kind of just laying out a little bit of that history. Their position of employees is pretty brief, but that's pretty normal in a initial local chairman claim, kind of just something that should be open and shut. But here's the proof. The proof is the car ID that they talked about, that's listed in the claim as far as what happened, that this is the waybill. And then they're going to come down and it's going to show who actually reset that waybill. And there is the manager's name is, the manager's what's called their RAC FID number is on there for who reset that waybill. And so that's what this local chairman uses as evidence. And so what happens is, you can see here the re-to line by user B7969, and B7969 is this manager Corbett. Now, these particular claims, most of the time we are able to resolve those, and we have thousands of claims that kind of fit this this bill. Generally, what happens is we have worked out trying to figure out, de minimis claims or those kind of things. Claims for computer functions, not this particular computer function, but other computer functions, have resulted in Unit 96 on CSX negotiating huge settlement agreements of hundreds of thousands of dollars, but also even resulted in negotiating an agreement to allow some of the work to be shared in exchange for a productivity fund, where everybody in the department got a productivity fund based on their day's worked every year. To date, in about 8 years now, that fund has paid a little over $3.5 million. And so, but again, it started with a claim just like this, and then it went from one claim to hundreds to thousands. But TCU was successful in winning that claim, and we continue to push these claims forward. And again, it's work. That's work, and it takes effort. And this local chairman was very familiar with how that process worked. I told you, believe it or not, we actually have won a claim on grass cutting. Now, the grass cutting wasn't specifically listed in the agreement, but we certainly, this is kind of a past practice argument that we raised here. It was past practice and scope. We had a job bulletin, or some job bulletins, that showed that mowing grass at Rockport, Florida was a requirement of some of our positions. What happened was the company hired a contractor, Double R Maintenance, to come in and use their equipment. What they said was it was too dangerous for our people to do it, although we've done it for years. It was too expensive to maintain the equipment. Imagine that, a multi-million-dollar railroad complaining that maintaining a lawnmower is too expensive. But they hired contractors, and the contractors charged considerably more than what the labor or the hourly rate for our employees were. But they came in and they used the bush hog, and they used the lawnmowers to do grass cutting. Our local chairman had worked in that location. He understood the responsibility, and so he started filing claims, and he would file them on a weekly basis generally. And he began filing them, and he would keep records of that. He actually had access to the invoices that were being filed, so he knew how many contractors were out there. He took pictures. Now, when using pictures, you have to be careful because there are policies around using personal electronics on the company property. So make sure that you either have permission or make sure that you're complying with the rules. If you have any questions at all about what's acceptable, talk with your A&R, talk with your NR. I'm using this just as an example where this local chairman did not violate the agreement in taking these pictures. So he filed he had pictures that supported what we were saying. He actually provided the invoices. I don't know if they're copied here or not. I don't think I copied the invoices. He had copies of the invoices that showed that. He had some statements from the employee. I really just wanted you to see the pictures. He had some statements from employees that talked about how long that TCU represented employees had done the work there. And so these claims, there was a bunch of them because this went on about a year before we actually resolved it. And the claims was over $100,000 divided up amongst probably 15 or 18 different employees. I forget now. And the company really fought us even after they agreed to settling the claims. They really fought us on getting the money to the employees, but we were able to do that, and our members are still mowing grass down in Rockport, Florida. So that's a good job by a local chairman that knew what he needed. He understood what he was looking for, and he took pictures, he got statements, he used invoices, and again, another example of success. So I'll give you an example of where it's not as clear cut. So this is dealing with ordering or strangers to the agreement, or people that are not clerks, ordering taxis for crews. Our crew dispatchers on CSX, they do order taxis, but there's a long-standing dispute that's actually it's kind of got a unique history on it. But what I want to show you is this. So there's no question we can prove what happened. We can prove that at 10:22 p.m., train dispatcher Staton ordered a taxi for this crew to go from Columbus, Ohio to Garrett, Indiana. No question, we can prove that, okay? Now, I'm going to show you how we can prove that in just a second. But here's what we can't prove necessarily, what we're struggling with proving. We're struggling with proving that this violates the scope of our agreement, that we own this work. And the reason we're struggling with proving that is because number one, it's been going on for quite a while, and we've kind of accepted. We've not. Let's see if I can turn this where we can see it here. It's been going on for quite a while, so we have access to this report, and we provided the company with hundreds of pages of these reports to support every claim. We filed thousands. That's right, thousands of claims over this. We can prove without a question, without any question, that what we say happened, happened. We have the evidence for that. But that doesn't necessarily make it a violation of the agreement, because the dispute is that work TCU's work? Do we own it? We have a positions and work scope rule, but there's a long history of where it's been shared between different train dispatchers, and that goes back to the late 90s when a automated system came in that allowed dispatchers to do that. So we're working through that issue now, and here's what I would say, just so you know. So this has been going on for a little over a year, and we still have not resolved this. It can be a slow process, because what happens isn't that we are fast. What happens is that we're right. And so if we can protect this work and protect jobs doing this work, that's what we're going to do. But I just wanted to give you an example of where we don't know how it's going to turn out yet. But what we do know is that we can prove it happened. But we're not, just because we've got evidence of what we say happened, that doesn't meet the burden of proof necessarily. We still have to prove that it violated the rule of our agreement. So this is another one. This is one that on CSX Intermodal, there's no question in my mind. The local chairman put the information together, and there's no question in my mind that what they said happened. And here's what they said happened. Look, statement of claim, statement of facts, position of employees. So let's look at what we say happened. Company violated Rule 1, Scope, Section C, among others of the ISE agreement, when on July 30th, between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., and 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., so during that day, it failed to use the senior available intermodal employee who were available to perform the functions, in lieu of assigning management employees, Patrick Cannell and Phil Lee, to perform the functions of clerical work, such as programmer, and ROS is a remote operating station. So what the local chairman filed the claim saying, Manager Lee and Manager Cannell were doing work on this day, and I had people that were available to be called for overtime at home. Now, I know the local chairman personally, and I know he would not file a claim that he didn't believe was accurate. But this is an example of where there was no evidence that was attached. And so I had to call this local chairman and say, hey, look, brother, I believe you, but we got to make the company believe you, or we're going to have to convince an arbitrator to believe us. So what I need you to do is get me more information. Now, here's the important thing. The local chairman was able to get the evidence that we needed, and I think we resolved this by paying maybe one person. I don't remember the exact settlement. But the point that I'm using this to illustrate is this is a perfect example of where we believe what somebody tells us, we believe what the local chairman says, but if there's no more evidence than this is classic hearsay. And if there's no more evidence than this, the national representative or the assistant national representative when they take that and it tries to they try to go to either their vice president or industry relations and seek approval from the president to arbitrate this, that request is going to be denied, because we don't risk arbitrating scope claims where we don't have evidence. So I would, if were we not able to get more information, I would have to tell the local chairman, I'm sorry, read them their rights. We can't arbitrate your claim. You didn't provide the evidence. Now what happens? When the local chairman takes and gives to the member and tells the member that sent him this information, that member is going to be offended. And that member is going to say, well, the union's not doing anything for me. And the union, they're going to say, well, you don't believe me. Or what's the matter? What do you mean? Well, you think I'm lying? You think I'm making it up? And so that it just creates a lot of awkward conversations. So the challenge is get the evidence you need, understand what you need. That's the purpose of this exercise. Get the evidence you need and put it on the record as soon as possible. So again, that's just 4 or 5 examples. A lot of them resulted in a lot of money. Some of them didn't. And some of them may, some of them won't. But at the end of the day, it's not about how much money. That's not the purpose of the claim. When I look at a claim, are we going to take it? It's not about how much money. And interestingly enough, all of those claims in the big dollar amounts, they weren't settled through arbitration. Those were settled by sitting down with the company and reaching a resolution. So I would just stress that getting the evidence is, for every successful example that another local chairman, an NR, a vice president, or our president, any example, even the national president, any example that they can point to of a successful claim, they would have to tell you that claim was successful because I had the evidence. And that's the only thing that makes claims successful. So I'm going to, let me get back to that. So again, I hope that this exercise has been helpful, and I hope that you'll take an opportunity to look at the exhibits. We'll put a lot of this stuff in Schoology that you'll be able to have. And at the end of the day, our job is to be able to equip you to be able to know what to look for and where to look for and how to put those pieces together. So we're going to be doing some interactive things in the next few weeks that I hope will be a big success for you. I can tell you on a personal note, National President Maratia has assigned me as his special assistant to work directly in leading our industry relations department and our communications department. And National President Maratia has an unwavering commitment to educating our representatives, both our new local chairman, continuing education for our existing local chairman, and also continuing education for our NRs and our ANRs, so that we just continue to grow together in defending our agreements and representing our members to the best possible. And you have my commitment on behalf of him that we will continue to work to that end, and all the resources of industry relations will be at your disposal to be able to assist you to any extent possible. So look forward to working with you. I hope that this video is helpful, and I hope that we'll be talking and interacting together in some of these virtual sessions real soon. Take care.